On this episode of Living with a Classic, we'll go through the auxiliary air valve on the Jaguar V12. Welcome back to Living with a Classic and part 4 of how to properly tune a Jaguar V12. In this part, we're going through the idle adjustment and the auxiliary air valve. If you haven't seen the other parts, I'll put a link to a playlist I made of them up above and down below so you can check those out. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel, I highly recommend that you do. I put new videos every week on some great Jaguar related content, so you can navigate down to my channel, have a look at some cool videos, and while you're down there, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss any updates. So the auxiliary air valve was used on all of the fuel injected Jaguar V12s. All the way from the earliest ones in the early XJS all the way up until the 90s. They basically all look the same. Well, they do look the same on the outside, it's just the inside varied a tiny bit. But I've actually had some friends that have used some of the late 90s ones on their earlier cars, and that's worked completely fine. So they are basically the same. So they're used for a very long time. How they work is, you have a thermostat bulb down here, which is very similar to the thermostat in the cooling system. This sits down in the cooling system like this, so you have coolant going here. Then that pushes on a plunger up here, and there is a piston in there, you can see. So right now it's open, so this would be a cold one, so you get a lot of air coming through, which will raise the idle on a cold engine, which is what you want when you have all that enrichment. So when this gets warmed up, the wax inside expands, it pushes that plunger up, and it closes up that gap at about 80 degrees or 82 degrees. It should be fully closed. And that's when your idle is, down when it's warmed up, and it gets adjusted by here. So this is how you set your idle. And this has an air bleed here that goes past this. So when this is closed all the way, the air that goes through the idle is just set by this screw here. It's located on the B bank in the back, and I'll show you later on the car where it is on the car and how you can get it off. As you can probably tell, this one looks very nice. I've just had it restored by a guy in Lithuania called Jonas Loda. He restores these. He takes them apart. He's made all new parts, all new pistons inside, and he has access to new thermostat bulbs. So they're basically brand new when you get them back. You can still buy these in other places. However, they're quite expensive. So for about a third of that cost, you can have your original one rebuilt, which is kind of cool because this is the original one for my car and it's date marked 1977. It was very cool to put the original back on and have it fully rebuilt. I'll put some contact information to him down below. You can send him an email if you're interested in having yours rebuilt. He also features some other cool upgrades for these cars that I will be showing in future videos. So if you're interested in anything like that, you can send him an email down below. Now we'll head over to Workbench. I'll show you the tools you'll need to test your auxiliary air valve. Here's everything you'll need to remove the air valve, to test it, and to set the idle when you're done. You need a torque screwdriver to get it off. It's a T30 usually. You'll need some screwdrivers to get the hose clamps off. To set the idle when you're done, you'll need a 1/2-inch wrench, or on some of the later ones, it's a 13mm. You'll need a pot with some hot water to test it, and some type of thermometer. I like these infrared ones. They're just really handy. So now let's head on over to the car. I'll show you where the air valve is located and how you get it off. On the Jag V12, the auxiliary air valve is located right down here, back of the B bank, and just held in place with 2 torque screws and then a couple of hose clamps. So I'm going to get those off now, and we can take the old auxiliary air valve out. Start by getting all of your hoses off. I replaced all these a few years ago and all the hose clamps. So this is a good time to have a look over your hoses because you don't want any air leaks here. So if you look old, maybe really soft or just cracked, it's a good time to replace them when you're already taking all of this apart anyways. With all of that out of the way, you can now get to the 2 torque screws. On my car, they're T30. Might be different on yours if it's a later one, but I believe that they should all be T30 torques. Be careful when you undo them if you haven't had this part off before, because they do go into aluminum. There could be some coolant there. They could be stuck pretty bad, so you don't want to snap them off because that will be a real pain having to drill it out and retap it all. So just be really careful, take your time to get these screws out. And then you can just take the old valve out. So let's go over to the workbench and have a look at it. So here's the old one from the car on the right, and here's the one I've had restored. The restored one is actually the one that came on the car when I got it. It's from 1977, so it's the correct one. However, it was completely seized up when I got the car. So I found this one as a used one, and it wasn't a perfect one, but it sort of worked at least. It has been messed with a little bit, so that's why I'm really happy to restore this one. However, when I was fixing up this car about 5 or 6 years ago, I couldn't find anyone who restored these, and I really couldn't afford to get a new one. So you can see this one's been messed with. It's been pushed in a little bit here. It should be flat there. It's also been pushed in up here. I believe that's because this one was a little bit lazy. So it was pushed in. So this one works really well when it's warm. It closes fully, and it works well in the summer out as well. But however, when it gets a little colder, this one doesn't open up fully. So you get a really low idle when it's cold when you start up right away. So that's definitely why I'm replacing it. So before I put this one in, we're going to go inside to my kitchen and I'll show you how you can test if yours is working. It's not a perfect test, but it's a good way to see if yours is completely stuck or if it's working at all. So let's head on over to the kitchen and have a look at this one. Now we're in my kitchen and I'm going to show you how you can test if your auxiliary air valve is moving or not. So look inside it, you can see that it's open right there. There's an air gap between the bottom of the piston there and up there's a part of spring you can see. So it's at room temperature now, so that should be pretty open like it is here. I have a pot of water here that I boiled a while ago, and it's about 80 degrees or so. So you can hold this in here, the thermostat part, and really quickly that should close off. You don't want this to be boiling water because you could damage the thermostat. Because just as a thermostat in a car, if your car overheats, it could damage the wax inside and it won't work as well. So this is about 80 degrees, which is when this should close fully. So I'm going to leave it in here like this for a while, and then we're going to look inside and see if it's closed off. Now if you look inside, you can see it's fully closed there. And now if you leave it outside the pot for a little bit, it's a bit hot now to hold, so I'm just going to lay it down here on the side. And in a few minutes, you should be able to see that the piston goes down again and it opens up again. So leave this for a few minutes and come back to it. It's been a few minutes now. Let's have a look inside. All right, started to open up there. It's about halfway open or a little bit more than that. Still pretty warm to the touch, but I can definitely hold on to it. So this AAV, of course, is working perfectly because it's just been restored. Closed really nice and quickly when it was submerged in some water. And it's opening nice and smoothly and quickly once it's cooled off again. So this is a perfectly working auxiliary air valve for the Jaguar V12. If yours opens up like this one's done and it closes up fully, it's probably working just fine. However, they do get worn out with age, just like the thermostat in the car. The wax in here gets worn out, they'll get lazy, they might not close off fully, or they'll get stuck and there'll be some corrosion in there. They might not open up fully. So I definitely recommend, if yours is the original one, it hasn't been restored like this one, get it restored. Like I mentioned, I have some contact information down below from a great guy who restores these. You just send them off to him, he takes them all apart, put all the new parts inside of it, and you get back a great looking AAV like this one that looks brand new. So now let's fit this brand new one onto the car. So now everything is back together, the new auxiliary air valve is in place. Can run the car up to operating temperature and make sure there are no leaks around here. I did use a new gasket, so there should be no leaks at all. A tiny bit of air could be introduced in the coolant system when you do this, so you might want to purge any air from it, but it should be very minimal. So run the car up to operating temperature and then set your idle. It should be 750 RPM when it's in park or neutral with the air conditioning off. You set that with a wrench down here, so you turn it clockwise to decrease RPM and anti-clockwise to increase the RPM at idle. And then when the car is cold again, you should have a nice even idle at about 1000 RPM is what the idle should be when one of these are working perfectly and the engine is cold. And that's it. That's how you check your auxiliary air valve. When these are working correctly, you should just be able to start up your car, have a nice idle, and drive away, and you'll have a smooth and nice warm-up procedure just like on a modern car. Because basically these are pretty modern fuel injected system. You shouldn't have to wait like an old carburetor for it to warm up. There should be no stumbles when they're cold. They should work perfectly right away. So if you're having some idle issues, definitely have a look at your auxiliary air valve. If you find that it's not working correctly when you've tested it, I highly recommend that you have it rebuilt by Jonas. I'm super happy with the results. So in the comments below, please mention if there are any other upgrades or things that you'd like me to try in these engines, and I'll see if I can do that. Or if there are any other Jag related things that you would like me to try, and I'll see what I can do. Until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.